statutory responsibilities of the council. But that saying, the work that we've just had funded in terms of the Restore the Thaw landscape is fundamental to our Project Zero and biodiversity ambitions, and so if we can get funding along that sort of thing, that's fine. But I haven't found any sources of funding yet that fills potholes. So I it's always something to be considered, but doesn't always answer all the challenges that we face. So if I can say that we note the comments of the two scrutiny committees, and we agree the second recommendation from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny to adequately fund and resource more sustainable sources of procurement in order to meet its obligations under Project Zero, that basically we will plan to look at more sustainable sources of procurement. So I'm happy to move.
Yep, and I'll second those recommendations.
Super, thank you. So moving on to agenda item 6, therefore, and this is the reference from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 13th of December of last year. And I think, as we've heard when we've had the same conversations, that the revenue position was incredibly challenging in relation to children's and adults social care, and in terms of placements in care packages, and also for support for additional learning needs. We know that our children and young people were very adversely affected by the pandemic, and the increase in complex needs that we're now facing, in all sorts of things. It can come through in anxiety, it can come through in behavioural challenges, and those are things that we're seeking to look at. There are also inflationary pressures in terms of school transport, where costs are going up, and overspends in highway maintenance. The council has taken a number of steps in year to help mitigate the emerging overspend, and there'll be more of that again as we go into the budget setting, the final budget setting round. It talked about internal borrowing, talked about reorganising council space, and some of the challenging inflationary prices that we are facing. There were a number of areas that were discussed, and that was about the importance of anticipating potential demands. And I suppose the comment I would make on that is that we do that, and that's why we allocate reserves. And the challenge is matching reserves to what we see as potential demands, because, and they come through quite often in the risk register as well, that's discussed in our Governance and Audit Committee. The need for an equal focus on education as well as social services. Well, I think that on that, the nature of the needs are very different. And so while we prioritise our most vulnerable, which includes education and social services, we have to look at the nature of the need, and we have to prioritise accordingly. So we can't just say, well, we've got 10 million, we're going to spend 5 million on education, 5 million on social care, but they will be assessed in terms of need. And also, I suppose, if you look at it in terms of risk as well, that future reporting should break down split information on additional learning needs and Welsh language information. Well, that's being discussed with officers in terms of what's possible, and the importance of monitoring the capital programme and housing revenue account effectively. We actually brought stuff in last year which resulted in less slippage, much closer monitoring of the capital monitoring the capital programme and housing revenue. And I would seek to look at that. I'll be talking to the finance team to see whether or not there are any areas where we feel that there are slippages that we're not fully conversant with the causes and how we're going to mitigate them. And I suppose the other thing that was discussed was whether or not overspends were being seen as other Welsh local authorities relating to social services. Actually, the slippage, the cost pressures, financial issues, service pressures, actually is a picture that is experienced right across Wales. We talk to each other very, very frequently, whether we talk, I talk to other leaders across Wales, so that's not just, wouldn't just be Labour leaders. I work closely with the leader and deputy leader of Gwynedd. I work with the leader of Powys, and then also work with other leaders on different areas. So yes, we do that. So looking at the recommendations that were brought forward on there is, first of all, they noted the position of the revenue budget, and then they asked that the following comments be referred to Cabinet. Well, as I said, we've talked about the importance of anticipating potential demands. Well, yes, that's evident, as well as other challenges or risks when setting the budget and reserves. Well, as the budget comes forward, that hopefully will become self-evident. The need for equal focus on education as well as social services, I think that there is a priority on the most vulnerable, and within that there will be priority setting. I don't see how we can move away from that. The split and breakdown in terms of future reporting, we will discuss that with the teams and see what is possible within the data held, and the monitoring of capital programme and housing revenue account. I'll talk to the team about what additional monitoring we can do, but we do note that monitoring is important, and I suppose that's why we do it. So I think we will note those and take on board the importance of anticipating potential demands, and the importance of monitoring. And I think we'll note the committee's views on the equal focus on education as well as social services. Okay, and I'm happy to move that.
I'm happy to come in.
Yep, there we are, Mark, you're in now.
Thank you very much, Leader. And I think you made an excellent summary, but I think that, it's also important to recognise the hard work of the officers who have done really well in delivering a lot of these projects and making sure that we try as much as we can, bearing in mind the external cost pressures that we have from outside, to deliver much of our programme. And we will continue to monitor it ourselves as Cabinet members as well, because equally we have a role to ensure that that does occur. So thanks.
Thank you. So yes, I'm moving, and
I'll formally second for the record.
super. And is everybody in agreement with that? Can't see any dissent within here. Right, I just need to call up the relevant papers for this. So agenda item 8 is the Cabinet Quarterly Work Programme, October to December 2023. So that's a retrospective view on what we achieved. And then also January to March 2024. So that's looking at what we plan to work on. So if I can call that up. So if you have a look at the Quarterly Work Programme, which is said October 2023 to December 2023, unless I am very much wrong, we've managed to deliver all the reports that we needed to on time. So they are all outlined there, and it's actually a very handy report to file away somewhere if you're looking to find details on a particular report. It's an easily accessible one. And then let's have a look. I'm just scrolling down to get the next one. And then the Cabinet Quarterly Work Programme for January 2024 to March 2024 is laid out. And so within that, you will see that who the lead cabinet member is, whether or not the reports will be going to scrutiny, and whether or not they'll be going to council. Again, pretty much a housekeeping report, but it helps people to know when things are coming. So, for example, we would be hoping to be looking at school admission arrangements in March, and that is, we will be discussing the outcome of the consultation and the adoption of the admission arrangements policy. That won't go to scrutiny for consideration, and it won't go to council. So once it's discovered there, discussed there and approved, it will become policy. So that's in effect how that works. So this is fairly straightforward. And the two recommendations that we have before us today is that the updates to the Cabinet Quarterly Work Programme for October to December 2023, which are attached to Appendix 1, be agreed, and that the Cabinet Quarterly Work Programme January to March 2024 attached to Appendix 2 be endorsed, and I'd move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Thank you. And then we all in agreement. Yeah. No dissent online. So moving on again to the Cabinet Quarterly Work Programme. Sorry, I've just done that. The final housing revenue account budget proposals for 2024-25 and the rent setting 2024-25 and housing revenue account business plan 2024-25. And I think that before we finish this report, I'll refer to it a bit more. But there are a few little discrepancies in the appendices, either being referred to as Appendix 1 or Appendix A. So just for reference, and I will go back to it when we get to the recommendations, that it should be Appendices A and B. And so where you read Appendix 1, it should read Appendix A, and where you see Appendix 2, it should refer to Appendix B. But so we'll tweak one of the recommendations according to that. So just to give a little bit of background to the housing revenue account, and I listened in with interest to the scrutiny committee last night that discussed this, and there was an in-depth conversation there, which I'm sure we'll get as a reference in due course. But having listened to the discussion, I thought I'd mention it there. It's just as some background. The housing revenue account is a standalone account. I suppose what you could refer to it as is that a number of years ago, quite a lot of councils actually transferred their stock into housing associations. And this local authority, the residents or the tenants of the council, voted to stay within council control. But part of the regulations relating to such an arrangement is that the revenue account for the housing department, or in other words, the housing revenue account funding housing, should remain in effect separate from the rest of the council's finances. And there's quite a bit of discussion last night about so how do you put together a budget like that? And I suppose we could say, well, we'll just assess what budgets, what rents come in, and we'll assess what we need to have in terms of admin support and what we need to have in terms of repairs to those houses, and that will in effect be our business plan going forward. Or you could take this the view that this council does, in that we want to be ambitious in terms of housing. We don't want to make a profit. We're not a private landlord. We do not seek to make a profit out of our tenants, but we do seek, as would a social business or a social enterprise, we seek to develop a surplus which we can then use for building more council houses so that more people can benefit, so that we can upgrade the housing stock we've got so people live in efficient, well-maintained properties, so that we can upgrade them and make sure that they are as environmentally sustainable and low energy as they possibly can be. And so it's quite a tricky balance to get on that. But I think in terms of the balance, I mean, if you have a look at paragraph 1.4, and so, you know, while the Welsh Government set the policy for rent increases, for social housing rents, in benchmarking, it demonstrates, as I said, that our council rents are approximately 30% lower than you would find in private rented accommodation. And that's because we do not seek to make a private profit out of this. This is about creating a revenue account where it balances, but there's nobody actually trying to create a living out of the profits made from council housing rents. It's also why we're still markedly below the rents charged by registered social landlords that operate within the Vale. And I haven't got a problem with that, as long as we can deliver against our aims. We also, as well as having housing officers that support tenants, we have a housing income team, and that supports tenants in terms of financial issues. They're specialist money advisors, and so they can provide budgeting advice, advice on benefits, advice on income maximisation, securing grants, etc. And I think it's quite stunning, and I think our thanks have to go out to them, that team delivered additional household income of £250,000 to Vale residents. And that was achieved through additional benefits claims and backdated claims for benefits, lower cost tariffs for utilities and grants and things like that. So they are working alongside those. As was mentioned in last night's scrutiny committee, and it's covered under paragraph 1.8, one of the things I think is really important, because in terms of homelessness at the moment, we're seeing an increasing number of of houses being sold out from under people, or evictions, etc. And we pledge that there will be no evictions due to financial hardship for the term of this settlement, where tenants engage with their landlords. And I think it's important to put that last bit in, because sometimes when you're under huge financial pressure, it can be very tempting just to say, I'm not going to look at it because it's too difficult. But we know that we have all that support available to people, and we say that if they please talk to the housing team, please get support. And in that situation, while people are working with us, there will be no evictions due to financial hardship. I think it's good to mention the number of new homes that we're building at the moment, or continuing to build as well, and there are sizable numbers coming through in the next year. I'm sure there'll be more of that as the year goes on. I know that Councillor Perks has just hot-footed it back from seeing one of our latest developments as well. I'm shame I couldn't get there. So this is going to be sent to Council on Monday for discussion, so I won't go into it in any greater depth, although it is a sizable and very interesting report. So I'll just go straight to the recommendations. Oh, Mark, you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in now or after the recommendations?
Can I come in just now? Can I also say that I think people got to understand that the housing revenue account doesn't just look into housing in terms of the actual buildings, but also the management of those buildings as well. And I think it's very important that in part of my role as the cabinet member for building services, that we have a very good team of people, and responsible for that direct labour organisation for the council. We deliver speedily and effective repairs, and clearly having it as a self-sustaining housing revenue account is absolutely vital here. So people got to understand that. Plus also that our rents are the cost of living crisis affects the council as well, and it affects many of us, and costs have gone up quite a lot, as no doubt many people appreciate. So it's always a difficult balance to do this, but pressures affect us all. So I do want to support that, but I'm sure that someone else will come in to second it. I'm happy to support it anyway. Thank you.
Super, thanks, Mark. And Sandra, you had your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. As the leader mentioned, I did have the privilege of going visiting some of our properties that are due to come online, ready for people to be able to rent today over in the Bendricks. And I just think we need to highlight the quality and the standard of homes that we are providing for our future tenants. There will be energy efficient. There will be space for families or individuals, in the properties that they have, to actually move around those properties fairly easily, and enjoy the benefits of having, sort of energy efficient properties, having properties that are future proofed, where we're providing in homes that we're providing a downstairs bathroom in case that is needed in the future, as well as the upstairs, that the homes themselves, that the light switches are at a certain level, so that if somebody has a wheelchair use, they can easily access the light. So it's that sort of detail that we are providing in our homes, which is really important. But those are the new homes. But we also, as Mark and yourself leader has mentioned, we have retrofitted our properties as well. I know that I live next door to one of our council tenants, and they've had a new bathroom, new kitchen, windows, central heating, and the maintenance that's provided on those homes is really important. And the HRRA helps towards us ensuring that we can do this for our tenants that we have now, and that we can build our ambitious plans that we have for homes in the future as well. So, it can feel to some of our tenants that it's quite a struggle that they're having this increase. But I would encourage any tenant, if they're struggling, to get in touch with our officers who can support them. And as the leader said, you know, we've got that no evictions due to financial hardship, which I think is really important and is something that I fully support as a cabinet member. So thank you, leader.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping. I was really sad not to be able to come and join you today, and I'm hoping I can get there beforehand. And it's actually reminded me of a conversation I had with the Motor Neurone Disease Association, I think it is. But anyway, I was talking to them, and they were talking to me about adaptations, etc. And when I talked to them about how we were building homes for life that were easily adapted. So that you know, if people were in need, it could be sorted in a matter of weeks, maybe even days actually, but certainly within weeks. They were quite stunned, and they'd actually asked if they could see what we were doing, and I've completely forgotten to invite them. So remind me, and I will get in touch with them, and maybe they can join us to come and have a look at the new properties. But there are many more, and I think it's also worth noting in terms of house building. And we were talking earlier about monitoring slippage, etc. The ones that you visited today were a development that sadly failed because of the insolvency of the contractor that was delivering them, and we took it over, and we have delivered it. As a result, the subcontractors didn't lose any money, and the site, although the initial completions were delayed a bit, by the time we get to the final completion, we will be back on target, so that we won't have lost any time in terms of completion for that that development. And I think it's phenomenal. And I know I was driving past the other day, and every time I go past it, you have to smile, don't you? Because they are really lovely in terms of appearance, but also we know what's inside, and we know what super homes they're going to be. So thank you for that. I have a number of recommendations that are laid out, if I can get to them. So if first of all, if I say that recommendation 1 is that the final housing revenue account budget proposals for 2024-25 are recommended to council as outlined below, and there is a table below that first recommendation. I'm not going to try and explain it. Recommendation 2 is an average rent increase of 6.7 as set out in paragraph 2.25. Recommendation 3, the increase suggested for other services as set out in the table below and in paragraphs 2.18 and 2 to 2.25, and there's a table there in terms of services. Recommendation 4, all changes to rents and service charges be implemented from 1st of April 2024, with the first week of April being a non-chargeable rent week, and that increase notices are sent to tenants 2 months in advance of the new charges coming into effect, as required by the Renting Homes Wales Act. 5, and this is the one that I have to change slightly, that Cabinet approves the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan 2024. That actually should say 25, it says 54. I missed that earlier. And the recommendation, we can alter that as well. It says brackets draft. Yes, it definitely is draft. Attached to Appendix 1 to this report. But that Appendix 1 should read Appendix A. So I managed to change that as well. And finally, recommendation 6, that Cabinet approves the use of the urgent decision procedure as set out in section 1514 of the Council's Constitution in order for the final housing revenue account budget proposals 2024-25 rent setting and housing business plan to be referred to a special full council meeting on the 15th of January 2024. So use of the urgent decision procedure just means that it wouldn't be called into scrutiny. It's already been to scrutiny, and this is allowing it then to get to cabinet, to get to council on Monday without delay. So I would move those recommendations.
And I'll formally second those for the record.
I think the cabinet member is upset.
Oh, sorry.
But
Mike.
okay, so we're going on now to agenda item 10, if I can find it, and I also have to go back to agenda item 7. So agenda item 10 is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, Q2 performance. That's for the annual delivery plan for 2023-24. And we had a reference at agenda item 7, which was the from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 13th of December of last year. So the monitoring report was a slightly different layout due to some challenges that we faced on that. So we revised it, and there was a presentation to the scrutiny, which has been appended at Appendix A, and that provides a summary of progress against our annual delivery plan commitments. And Appendix B to the report provides progress against our annual delivery plan commitments for the same period as aligned to the remit of the 5 scrutiny committees. All scrutiny committees have actually now seen this report. Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee discussed it on the 5th of December, and they noted the report, and they noted the remedial actions being taken to address areas of underperformance and tackle key challenges identified within the remit of that committee. The Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee on the 6th of December also noted the report and also noted the remedial actions. And on the 7th of December, Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee looked at it, and they similarly noted the report and the remedial actions and key challenges identified. Environment and Scrutiny Committee similarly noted both the report and the remedial actions, and then it's actually mentioned in this report, but it's, as I said, it's the actual reference itself is included at agenda item 7, going back and forth between the two reports. And the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, they asked that Cabinet note the importance of the Vale of Morgan Council working with stakeholders, other public and private bodies and partners. And I think it's probably worth adding a reminder, and if you look at we were discussing earlier about the Forward Work Programme, twice a year we actually have a report on collaboration work that we do with other bodies, whether that be other local authorities, whether it be with third sector, etc. So I think from that perspective, we already do a huge amount. And they also asked that Cabinet note the further request of the committee to ensure that specific areas of PSB activity are presented for scrutiny. Unfortunately, I didn't attend that, so I'll probably have to watch it back. I'm not totally sure what specific areas of PSB activity are presented for scrutiny, so I will discuss with the officers as chair of the PSB that is possible. But we probably also have to be mindful of not creating another committee for PSB members to attend. So we'll have a look at where we can do that for a positive effect, or where they are areas of areas of activity that would be specifically relevant to the committee. I think it's probably worth us looking at other scrutinies as well to see where the work overlaps. So, yeah, happy to accept the recommendations from corporate performance and resources on this, and note the other comments, and then the actual recommendations for us on this are firstly that Cabinet considers Course 2 performance results and progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan 2023-24 commitments as aligned to our corporate plan wellbeing objectives, and secondly that Cabinet considers the views and recommendations of scrutiny committees in relation to Course 2 performance and approve identified remedial actions as the basis to address areas of underperformance and tackle the key challenges identified. I'd move.
And I'll second those.
Oh, I understand that Councillor Williams, if I'd looked properly, I would have seen that, has his hand up. Hi, Eddie.
Hi, Leader. Thank you for it's just that you referred to the references and the comments regarding the PSBs and the reports. I was present at the meeting online, so I was able to listen to the discussion, and it was quite clear that obviously the importance of the PSB was recognised and all the work that's been done, and particularly you mentioned the collaboration, all the different partners. It speaks for itself, really. There was a concern when it was raised that we should be scrutinising the PSB reports because really that governance isn't in place, and the officer agreed that we would look into it, but clearly, from my view, we're already doing that through our various committee, there's boards, governance boards and the like, and I just didn't think it came forward in this particular item when they were discussing PSBs, but there is sufficient governance, I would suggest. Nevertheless, the officers did say that they were going to look into it, so I just thought I'd add that to the reference.
Thank you, Eddie. Yeah, actually, with that comment, it probably would be good if it could be added to the discussion, because we are having meetings shortly between Cabinet members and scrutiny chairs, and I think it would be very useful if that was added onto that agenda, so that we can explore effective governance rather than reports for the sake of it, I suppose. I know actually I'd forgotten to mention that there was mention of the work around age-friendly status for the Vale of Glamorgan as mentioned in that committee, and that is super. So yes, I'll have a chat to the director, but I think, as I said, if we can add it onto the recommendation to the agendas for those meetings to see how that would be managed most effectively, I think that would be good. Is that okay? And you seconded, didn't you?
Yes.
Super. So agenda item 11 is retendering of insurance 2023-24. This is a part 1 report, and you'll notice that there's a part 2 report at agenda item 15 that we will be looking at shortly. So in essence, in overview, the council manages insurance, and in 2 particular ways. If you actually look at paragraph 1.1, and it says either we talk about reserves, etc. We have a reserve, an insurance reserve, where we in effect insure ourselves against some risks where it's felt that actually having that money available is more cost effective than paying premiums in an ongoing manner. But then there are other areas where the risk is large, and we therefore take the decision that we will insure those risks externally, where we don't feel that an in-house reserve would be sufficient, and those are listed under paragraph 1.1. As with everything else recently, there are financial pressures on insurance, and I think there's been lots of stuff about the cost of insurance premiums going up. There have also been issues relating to COVID. We took out, the last time we tendered policies were in 2018-19, and they were placed on a 5-year long-term agreement, and so we need to go through that again. We'll, in this process of retendering our insurance, we'll actually have a look at a range of alternative models, and so we'll look at what the outcomes will be from using a variety of different excesses. We'll be modelling and reviewing the council's claim history to see what the likely usage is, and the specification for the contract will be drawn up by council officers. And I think that we were talking earlier about risk, weren't we? Is what's our appetite for risk? Do we want to be covered on absolutely everything, or do we want to look at where we think it's reasonable to have a certain size of excess that the council would be prepared to bear, versus having a much higher insurance cost where there's a lower excess to be paid should we want to make a claim. So in essence, as I said, this report is about how we will be, the need to tender for new insurance cover, the process that we intend to go through, some of the pressures on us, and we've got 4 recommendations before us on this Part 1 report. So it's recommended that Cabinet note the position regarding the Council's insurance arrangements and the tender process to be followed. 2, that Cabinet delegates the authority to determine and generally deal with all aspects of the procurement process and auxiliary matters up to and including the awarding of the contract for a period of 3, 5 or 7 years, to the head of finance, a Section 151 officer, in consultation with the executive leader and cabinet member for performance and resources. That Cabinet authorises the monitoring officer, head of legal and democratic services, to agree the terms of and execute contracts with the successful providers. And finally, the Cabinet agrees the direct award of the leasehold insurance. So those are recommendations before us, and we will discuss the rest of it in part 2 later. I'd move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Thank you. So moving on to the reports of the Cabinet Member for Community Engagement, Equalities and Regulatory Services, we have agenda item 12, the Annual Equality Monitoring Report 2022-23, and this is over to Councillor Sivanyanam, as if by magic.
Thank you, Leader. So if we start with the Annual Equality Monitoring Report for 2022-23, I'm bringing this report to Cabinet to look at our progress against our equality objectives, which are within our Strategic Equality Plan for 2020 to 24. And the report actually looks at all the other actions that we've taken to improve equality for people living and working in the Vale of Glamorgan. it basically summarises what services have done to collect and analyse equality data on how people with protected characteristics have used those particular services. And it notes what they have done to make improvements, and that's specifically for the reporting period 2022 to 23. So in terms of background, Leah, it might help if I explain that the Equality Act of 2010 includes a public sector equality duty, which is the general duty. And underneath that, there are specific duties for Wales. And the specific duties include the requirement to publish an annual report for the previous year by the 31st of March to demonstrate the progress made on equalities issues. And these are contained within, as I've said, our own strategic equality plan, and all the other equalities activities that are associated with that. So if I just run through some sort of key considerations, the annual equality monitoring report can be found at Appendix A, and it's a lengthy report, but I think it really does demonstrate the kind of work that we're doing, and the fact that we as a council are really committed to equality within the Vale of Glamorgan, through all our services, through our policies, and Leader, you were talking about the housing revenue report earlier. It's really important that we use our resources to ensure that people who are in social housing, which we are sort of supervising or in control of, that we ensure that their futures are also bright, and that's what our strategic equality plan will hopefully achieve in the years to come. There are 10 objectives in the strategic equality plan. And some of those objectives, for example, are to improve how we involve, engage and communicate with protected groups about our work and decisions. So, for example, our contact centre, there were around 172,000 phone calls between April 2022 and March 2023. The average wait time was around 327 seconds, which I think is probably about sort of 5 minutes. There are around 35,000 emails to C1V, and approximately 87% of customer service inquiries were resolved at first contact. And all of this, we endeavour to improve on all of this, but I would say that this is it's a good achievement. We've achieved a great deal already. We've also, as you will know, Cabinet, we have also had our public participation strategy. The communications team published our public participation survey in May 2022 and have made strides in establishing an internal network to coordinate the council's participation work. And this includes representatives from key corporate teams and other services such as the youth service. And the public participation strategy outlines the council's current position on engagement and consultation. And as well as that, it sets out how we will be diverse in our engagement methods to provide as many stakeholders as possible with the opportunity to be, part of the decision-making processes within our council. So that's just, sort of an example of one of those objectives. And as I say, there are 10 objectives, and you will see those at Appendix A. The annual equality monitoring report contains a series of appendices to provide further information and make links with other relevant reports. I'm asking Cabinet to consider the report at Appendix A in particular, obviously, because that is the report, but to refer that report to scrutiny committee. And once that's approved, the annual equality monitoring report will be translated so that bilingual versions will be available. So if I move to the recommendations, Leader, first is that the Cabinet approves the annual equality monitoring report for 2022 to 23, as described at Appendix A. And secondly, that Cabinet refers this report to Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee, and that any comments be referred back to Cabinet for consideration and inclusion in the final version of the annual equality monitoring report. And so I so move, Leader.
Super. Thank you, Ruba, and I'm very happy to support that, because at the end of the day, you know, if we don't understand the characteristics, is a very clunky word, but the characteristics also are the needs as well of our residents, then how can we best serve them? So yeah, and you know, we're having lots of discussions about how a focus on digital services can actually also support our residents more effectively. But in order to do that, we need to know more about our residents. So yeah, very happy to move that, and thank you very much. So the next report is also yours, isn't it? Agenda item 13, and that's a review of the Vale of Glamorgan Council strategic equality objectives for the period 2024-25.
Thank you, Leader. Now, this follows on quite nicely from my previous report. And as you mentioned, Leader, in recent months, we've had some really strong data, not via Welsh Government, but also within our own local, within the Vale of Glamorgan, our Let's Talk survey, which is really sort of important and strong data that we want to review, and we want that to be part of our review of our equality objectives. So this report sets out how the Council intends to review the draft strategic equality objectives which runs from 2020 to 24. Now you'll note, Leader, that seems to be finishing this year, and that we ought to be looking at our, the next 4 years. But what I'm asking Cabinet to look at is what we want to do is we want to review the strategic equality objectives against some of the strong data that's already come out, and also, Leader, against a background where we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've had the Black Lives Matter movement, we've had some key events over the period of this our current strategic equality plan and these objectives, and it is really timely that we properly review that, as well as alongside the new data that will be provided to us locally through the Let's Talk survey, but also nationally via the Fair Wales initiative that Welsh Government initiated. So we want to properly review that. So as part of that, I'm bringing this report to look at our objectives, and the report sets out the process by which we'll do that, and it sets out a timetable for reviewing our objectives. So specifically, the report sets out the timetable for reviewing the consultation findings and the development of the final draft for consideration by the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee and Cabinet prior to the publication of the strategic equality objectives within its strategic equality plan for 2024 to 25. And that has to be done by the 31st of March this year. And the strategic equality plan sets out the Council's strategic equality objectives, which are a requirement, as I've said previously, Leader, in the Equality Act of 2010, and the specific duties for Wales. and they frame how the council will deliver its equalities vision for working together for a fairer future and support the council's corporate objectives. And in doing it this way, Leader, having this extension, if you like, of 12 months to properly review our objectives for the strategic equality plan, it will be aligned with our corporate objectives and our corporate plan. And I think those two being alongside will reinforce each other. It will reinforce our commitment to, really achieving equality within the Vale, but also feeding into our corporate objectives, and both of those will work alongside, which I feel will be will strengthen both, if you like, moving forward. So if I move to the recommendations, the first recommendation is that Cabinet approves the proposals for the review of the equality objectives contained at Appendix A, ahead of the wider stakeholder engagement as outlined in this report, and the equality impact assessment, which I think is at Appendix B. The second recommendation, Leader, is that the Cabinet refers this report and the appendices to the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee for their consideration as part of the proposed consultation process as outlined in the body of this report. And I would move.
Thank you, Rupert. Again, delighted to second this. I can't see any dissent in the room. And I think that to have it work more closely with the corporate plan, which we will be developing the next iteration of that shortly, will be good. It also hopefully will provide greater context, because we have so many different plans and strategies. It's always better if they can work together and we can refer from one to the other to provide context to our sort of actions and policies. So thank you for that. So I don't have any urgent items under part 1, but as mentioned previously, I do have a part 2 item at agenda item 15, which was linked to the agenda item 11 earlier. So this is a matter that's considered to be confidential, and therefore the meeting will need to move into private session, where such confidential matters can be discussed under part 2. Therefore, I'll ask for Cabinet to agree to move to part 2, and ask the Cabinet member to stop recording of this open session to ensure that no members of the public are present after this point, and only to allow relevant parties to remain to hear the detail of the items to be discussed. Following the meeting, the outcome of the part 2 discussions will be formally captured as part of the minutes of the meeting, and will advise all parties of the final decisions of the Cabinet for the relevant items. So if I can formally move part 2.
And I'll formally second that.
Thank you, Bron. And ask Cabinet Officer to ensure only relevant parties remain from this point, and for the live stream and recording to be stopped. If you could let me know when that's happened.